Shame hung thick in the air like a fog, suffocating the room with its weight. Martin Cole, the operations manager, leaned in close, his voice dripping with contempt. "Do you still not know your place, Elaine?" he sneered, each syllable sharpened by disdain. "You're just a janitor, nothing more. Clean this floor again and make it shine like a mirror. If I can't see my reflection in it, don't bother coming back." Clare Morrison stood motionless for a beat, her hands still gripping the mop. Her uniform clung to her as if it too were absorbing the insult. But her voice, when she finally spoke, was composed, almost serene. "Sir, I've already cleaned it thoroughly, multiple times." She didn't flinch. Not yet. Without warning, Martin seized a cup of ice water and in one calculated motion dumped it over her head. The freezing liquid cascaded down her scalp, traced icy fingers across her cheeks, soaked her uniform and pooled around her feet. She gasped, not from the cold, but from the raw humiliation. Her breath hitched, not from discomfort, but disbelief at the intentional cruelty of it all. Martin grinned. "Now that's something worth cleaning," he said smugly, turning on his heel with the swagger of someone who believed he had won. What he couldn't have known, what he would never imagine, was that the woman he had just tried to break was not just any night janitor. She was the very architect of the empire he strutted through. The woman who had poured every drop of her soul into building Reeves' financial group. And she had just begun her final act. High above the city lights of downtown Chicago, the towering Reeves Financial Group stood as a monument to ambition and grit. Its regal blue and gold logo shimmered in the skyline, a symbol of innovation and dominance. But behind the polished glass and marble was a legacy built not from boardrooms and bonuses, but from sweat, sacrifice, and an indomitable will. Clare Morrison's name was once spoken in hushed admiration across the industry. She wasn't born into wealth. She didn't have a pedigree. At 28, a black woman in a world that still whispered its prejudices, she dared to dream beyond limitation. Renting a single room at the edge of Neepville, surviving on instant noodles and borrowed hope, Clare willed her company into existence. Every sleepless night spent on an office floor without heat, every grant application filled with trembling fingers, every rejection she turned into fuel. Those were her foundations. 3.5 decades later, Reeves Financial was a global force. IPOs, mergers, accolades. Her empire stretched across continents. But what never changed was her memory. She remembered what it was like to be invisible, unheard, and underestimated. That's why stepping away hadn't been easy, but after 35 years of relentless devotion, she passed the torch to her son, Nathan, a brilliant, principled graduate from Wharton who had grown up on her philosophies of equality, empathy, and excellence. Clare believed the future was safe in his hands. But time, like power, can corrode in silence. A year into her retirement, uneasy murmurs began to echo through the corridors of her once beloved company. Former colleagues, loyal staff, and old friends reached out, their voices low and urgent. Words like toxic, hostile, and abusive replaced the once proud descriptors she'd built her reputation on. Honorable, inclusive, visionary. The stories chilled her. Interns dismissed without cause, employees belittled, voices silenced. Layers of hierarchy that buried compassion under numbers and profit margins. The soul of her creation was slipping away. She couldn't just stand by. So she made a choice, a radical one. She would return, not as founder, not as a silent partner. She would come back in disguise, beneath the radar, cloaked in humility. She would become a janitor in her own company, to see what others saw, to hear what they whispered when they thought no one important was listening. She abandoned the armor of her reputation and stepped into anonymity. Wearing a plain gray uniform, thick-rimmed glasses, and a name tag that read Elaine. Clare Morrison walked not through the executive entrance she once designed, but through the rear service door of the very tower she had built from the ground up. Her first shift began at 10 p.m. The building was quiet, its sterile silence broken only by the hum of machines and flickering lights. A tired supervisor handed her a cleaning cart without so much as a glance. No name asked, no welcome offered, just a nod and a broom. It struck her. The culture of indifference had seeped so deep that human decency no longer seemed necessary. She stood still in the dim corridor, staring at the plastic badge on her chest, a stranger to herself in the very empire she had birthed. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with a rage that pulsed just beneath the surface. Was this truly what had become of her dream? Footsteps approached. They were sharp, confident, entitled. Martin Cole rounded the corner, his gaze scanning her from head to toe with the detached cruelty of someone used to holding power without consequence. "You're new," he said, his voice cold. "We don't pay for slowness, especially not from someone your age. Move faster. I don't want to see a single speck of dust." Claire offered a polite nod, hiding the storm behind her eyes. "Yes, sir." "I'll be careful." Martin smirked and, in a final display of dominance, stepped deliberately onto the floor she had just cleaned, muddy footprints blooming behind him like scars. Claire stood in silence, not because she was defeated, but because she was watching, calculating, feeling every tremor of the decay she had come to cleanse. And deep in her heart, something awakened. Something fierce. The storm was coming. Doubt flickered for just a second. Had she made a mistake coming back like this, hidden, stripped of her name, her dignity, her power? But Claire straightened her back, picked up the mop and scrubbed the floor once more. It wasn't about her pride, it was about purpose, and this was only the beginning. In the days that followed, time slowed. For most, they were just ordinary shifts, but for Claire, every passing hour was soaked with bitterness and quiet grief. After the moment Martin Cole dumped that ice water over her head, she was no longer just watching. She was in it, immersed in the quiet suffering, surrounded by invisible pain that clung to the janitorial crew like a second uniform. What she uncovered was more than just disrespect. It was a quiet, pervasive culture of emotional erosion. Dignity was eroded with every glance of disregard, every dismissive word. People didn't just feel unimportant, they felt erased. Her heart ached as the truth set in. The soul of Reeves Financial Group, the values she had once carved into its foundation with blood, sweat, and vision, were fading, not loudly, not violently, but quietly, like dust swept into corners. The deeper Claire submerged herself in the life of Elaine, the clearer the reasons for the staff's silence became. They moved with urgency not just because of workload, but because looking up was dangerous, because eye contact risked judgment, because silence had become a defense mechanism in a place that no longer remembered kindness. They worked in gleaming corridors, surrounded by glass walls and million-dollar decisions, but they were ghosts, unseen, untouched, unknown. One Thursday evening, on the 37th floor, Claire witnessed cruelty unfold again. Elena Rivera, a gentle soul in her early 30s with eyes that still carried hope, was wiping down the glass near the elevator when a bottle of cleaning solution slipped from her hand. It burst open, splattering near a pair of polished black shoes. The shoes didn't flinch. Martin Cole looked down, then slowly raised his gaze. His voice cracked like a whip, echoing down the marble hallway. "Do you have any idea how much these shoes cost?" His words cut sharp, designed to wound, to humiliate. Elena froze, eyes wide, lips quivering with a frightened apology. Then came the venom, quieter, more dangerous. "You really think you'll ever afford something like this, doing what you do?" he hissed, stepping in close, voice low and poisonous. "People like you need to remember your place. Do it again, and don't bother showing up." He turned away, his cologne trailing behind like a mark of arrogance. Claire moved toward Elena. She placed a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder. Elena, fighting tears, whispered, "It's okay. I'll be fine," then bent down and resumed wiping the floor, only now it wasn't just cleaner she was spreading, it was humiliation. Later that night, Claire sat alone in the break room. Her reflection stared back at her from the black sheen of the microwave door. And what she saw wasn't the janitor Elaine. It was a founder watching her legacy rot from within. This wasn't about metrics. It wasn't about missed quarterly goals or stock dips. The true failure was written in the eyes of Elena Rivera. It screamed from the silence of witnesses who turned away. And Martin wasn't the only symptom. Logan Brooks, the marketing director with perfect teeth and a designer watch, had already crossed paths with Claire. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His cruelty was quieter, sharper. He attacked through games, through accidents, through the smirk he wore like armor. On her third night mopping the marketing suite, Logan passed by, glanced around, and said with a smirk, "This isn't a frat house. Get it right next time." Then, locking eyes with her, he casually opened his protein shake and let it drip onto the freshly cleaned floor. Claire said nothing. She wiped it. But the worst came later. While emptying the trash in his office, Logan watched her, for minutes, in silence. Then, without looking away from his screen, he muttered, "I don't get why we hire people like you. Isn't this what robots are for?" The words weren't just offensive, they were annihilating. Because what he saw as replaceable labor was the very woman who had once written the values of Reeves Financial by hand. What crushed her wasn't just his arrogance, it was the indifference around him. Team leads, HR reps, bright-eyed associates. They heard, they saw, and still they stayed silent. That silence echoed louder than Logan's insult. It confirmed something far more terrifying. This culture of cruelty wasn't accidental. It was systemic. Claire realized then, Logan wasn't the disease. He was a symptom. The deeper she went, the more clearly she saw. She wasn't mopping floors anymore. She was unearthing the rot. And she made herself a silent vow. She would not leave until the truth was too loud to be ignored. Every night she returned to Reeves Financial, it no longer felt like revisiting a proud legacy. It felt like stepping into a war zone, where dignity died by 1,000 quiet cuts. She had braced for discomfort, but she hadn't expected the cruelty to be this deliberate, this polished. Martin Cole didn't scream every night. He didn't need to. His power came from implication, from control. One Wednesday evening, Claire sensed him before she saw him. The hallway was dim. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly. He appeared like a phantom in a suit. "Are you done here, Elaine?" he asked, voice flat. "Yes, Mr. Cole. Everything's been cleaned according to protocol," she answered, her tone measured. Martin didn't reply. Instead, he slowly reached into his blazer and produced a pristine white cloth. He knelt, dabbed it against a corner of the baseboard, and examined it like a judge rendering a verdict. They were spotless, but he sneered anyway. "This is what you call clean?" he scoffed. Then, dropping the cloth like evidence of failure, he added, "Do it again, and make sure I don't find anything next time." Claire picked up the cloth, her spine burning with silent fury. Martin walked away, chuckling to himself, a low, hollow sound that rang like a warning. But his malice didn't end there. Days later, Claire was cleaning the windows in the boardroom on the 40th floor. The city of Chicago sparkled in the distance, a sea of gold and silver stretching into the dark. For just a second, she allowed herself a breath of peace. Then Martin entered. And this time, he wasn't holding water. He held a fresh, steaming cup of coffee. He approached with a casual stride, standing beside her at the glass window, as though they were peers sharing a quiet moment over the city. The Chicago skyline sparkled in the night, but there was nothing warm about his presence. Without even glancing at her, Martin Cole spoke, his voice drenched in condescension. "Ela, do you know why people like you will always just be janitors?" Claire paused, her hand frozen mid-wipe. "No, sir," she said, her voice quiet but firm. He sipped his coffee, smirking as if he were delivering a piece of sage wisdom rather than a dagger to the heart. "Because people like you accept mediocrity. No ambition, no capability, no self-respect. You do what's required, never what's exceptional." As he spoke, he tilted the cup just enough to let dark liquid spill, splattering onto the glass she had just painstakingly polished. The coffee trailed downward, leaving a streak like a scar. Claire said nothing, not because she was afraid, but because something deeper was unfolding inside her. Martin wasn't just trying to diminish her. He was using her, weaponizing her silence as a spectacle for others. He was constructing a performance of fear, and she was the unwilling star. He placed the half-empty cup on the conference table like it was beneath his interest. "Clean it up. I want this room so spotless I can see my reflection in every surface." She obeyed. Not because he deserved her obedience, but because she was beginning to see the true scope of the rot. Martine was setting a tone, and everyone else was dancing to it. In the days that followed, Claire saw the change. The glances of the other janitors fleeting, fearful. They watched her not just with sympathy, but with a growing terror. No one spoke. No one dared. They had learned what happened to those who became visible. Martin wasn't just a tyrant. He was a virus, infecting the environment with silent obedience. Even acts of kindness, like a janitor quietly refilling her supply cart, came without eye contact, without words. In this twisted version of Reeves Financial, silence had become currency, survival. But Claire, beneath the uniform, beneath the bruises of humiliation, was growing stronger. Every insult, every impossible demand, every smirk of satisfaction he threw at her only sharpened her purpose. She wasn't cleaning anymore. She was preparing. She wouldn't strike yet. The moment had to be perfect, calculated. But when it came, Martin would have no idea what was coming. The pressure inside Reeves Financial was no longer invisible. It pressed on Claire's chest with every shift, every room, every smug glance she absorbed. She had survived Martin's public humiliations, but the toll on her spirit, on her identity, was growing heavier. One weekend evening, as the upper floors emptied, Claire moved through the executive wing with her cart, checking each room. Her back ached. Her hands were red and raw. Her mind ached with exhaustion and unspent fury. She had almost finished when the door swung open. Amanda Sloan, the vice president of business strategy, high heels clicking, eyes cold and calculating. Behind her, 2 junior staffers, stiff with nerves, trailed behind, clutching binders. Amanda's gaze zeroed in on Claire like a hawk spotting prey. "Why are you still here?" she snapped, her voice sharp and scolding. "This is a senior-level briefing. You're not supposed to be in this room." "Just finishing the scheduled cleaning, ma'am," Claire replied, evenly. Amanda's eyes narrowed. "This is not your place during an executive session. You're interrupting." Claire took a breath. "Apologies, I was told." "Don't talk back," Amanda snapped. "You were told nothing. You're here to clean, not to speak." The 2 staffers flinched. unsure whether to stay or flee. Claire turned to them briefly, hoping for anything, but their eyes dropped, silent. Then it happened. Without warning, Amanda stepped forward and slapped Claire across the face. The sound cracked through the air like thunder in a church. Claire stumbled back. The rag slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a soft, devastating thud. Her cheek burned, but what scorched her soul was the shame. Amanda looked down at her like she was dirt beneath her heels. "You need to remember your role. You're not part of this world. If you ever step out of line again, I'll make sure you regret it." And just like that, she turned back to business as if she hadn't just struck another human being. No one said a word. The junior employees stood like statues, silent in complicity. When the doors shut behind them, Claire was alone again. Her face bore a red mark, but the deeper wound, the invisible one, cut far more. This was her company, and yet this was what it had become. She leaned against the table, legs trembling, breath shallow. Was it worth it? Could she keep going? Then she remembered Elena's shaking hands, Martin's smirk after pouring coffee, Logan's smug disdain, and now Amanda's hand across her face. That moment birthed something unshakable. This wouldn't be endured, it would be exposed. Amanda's slap was more than a violation. It was a mistake, a fatal one. And Clare Morrison would make sure the entire company heard the echo of that mistake. That night she didn't cry. She planned. Her mission was no longer just personal. It was universal. She acquired 2 miniature recording devices and a pinhole camera. The first she sewed into her uniform collar. The second was hidden beneath her mop cart's rag bin, perfectly to catch faces, voices, and injustice. For 2 nights she tested it, watching the grainy footage from her small apartment. It worked. Now came the hardest part, capturing the rot in real time. Claire kept her disguise intact, her posture humble, her movements slow. She said, "Yes, sir," and "thank you," like a broken record, but her eyes never stopped watching. One night, passing the 42nd floor, her legs heavy with fatigue, she heard voices, not ordinary ones, not elevator chatter or late-night meetings. These were the voices. Martin, Amanda, Logan, Susan Hartley, the power brokers of the company. She parked the cart, reached down, activated the recorder. Then, quietly, she moved to the hallway wall. Inside that conference room, a storm was brewing, and Clare Morrison, once the founder, now the silent witness, was ready to capture every single drop of poison. The air inside the closed conference room thickened with tension as the voices echoed through the hidden recorder, filling the space with the damning clarity of betrayal. Martin's voice came first, sharp, impatient, oozing urgency. "We don't have time anymore. Nathan's starting to ask questions. If we don't move fast, the whole plan unravels." Amanda, ever the strategist, responded with cold detachment. Nathan was never built to lead. Claire made a sentimental mistake giving him the throne. We're just restoring order. Then came Susan, once the face of fairness, now a stranger with ice in her tone. The memos are written, the board documents are prepped. We're one staged audit away from turning the narrative. After that, it's a matter of procedure. He resigns. Logan, cynical and smug, added his venom. Just funnel the funds to the shell companies, shift the allocations, trigger the liquidity clause, and by the time the dust settles, we've already taken our places. Martin's the figurehead. We manage the power. A low, confident laugh followed. Martin again. And once I'm CEO, all this bleeding heart garbage ends. No more overpaid cleaners. No more committee kumbayas. We run this place like it should be run. For profit. For people who deserve it. Outside the door, Claire stood frozen. But not with fear. With fury. These weren't just corrupt executives. They were conspirators, thieves in tailored suits, and they were laying out the destruction of her son's future and everything she had built in full casual detail. But Claire didn't barge in, not yet. She knew that silence was her weapon now. She let the tape run. She captured it all. When the meeting ended, the conspirators left one by one, none the wiser, none aware that their downfall had just been recorded, second by second, from the very janitor's cart they'd mocked. Claire's hands shook as she retrieved the recorder, not with panic, but with purpose. Back in her apartment that night, she pored over the evidence. She transcribed every word, backed up every file, one copy to a hidden USB, one to an encrypted cloud, buried under a false identity. Now she didn't just carry anger, she carried proof. It was time. Early Sunday morning, in a quiet corner of a North Side bookstore cafe, Claire met her son. Nathan Morrison, CEO of Reeves Financial, sat across from her with eyes shadowed by stress, his coffee untouched. He greeted her gently. "Mom, you've been distant. No one's seen you since the gala. Where have you been?" Claire studied him carefully. He looked older, weary, not just from workload, but from betrayal he didn't yet understand. "I've been working," she replied simply. "Doing what?" Nathan asked, his voice cautious. Claire reached into her worn purse. Her fingers curled around the USB like it was her lifeline. She set it on the table, letting the silence explain what words couldn't. "What is this?" Nathan asked, frowning. Claire finally spoke, with a voice made strong from weeks of silence. "The truth, Nathan. Not the one from quarterly reports. Not from executive briefings. The real truth. About Martin, Amanda, Logan, Susan." Nathan stiffened. "For the last 3 weeks," she continued, "I've been inside your company, not as your mother, not as the founder, as a janitor. My name was Elaine. And what I saw," she slid the drive closer, "it's all on there." Nathan stared at it like it might explode. "They're moving money, creating fake audits, positioning Martin to steal your seat. They think you're too soft. They think I'm gone." He shook his head, the disbelief already cracking. "Martin's been with us 15 years. Amanda's reshaped entire divisions. Logan's arrogant, sure, but—" "Stop." Claire's voice was steel. "Amanda slapped me. Martin used cleaners as pawns. Logan played games with human dignity. And Susan? She's rewriting records to make it all look clean." Nathan leaned forward, his defenses crumbling. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me," she said gently. "You needed to see. Now you can." He picked up the flash drive, holding it like it held the fate of the company. In truth, it did. "How do I start?" he whispered. Claire looked into her son's eyes, unflinching. "Start by listening. Tonight. Alone. Then go into that building tomorrow with your eyes open." She leaned in, her voice soft but electric with conviction. "You're the CEO, Nathan. But if you let them control you, manipulate you, then the title means nothing. If they kill the values we spent a lifetime building, then they've already won." Nathan saw her clearly now, not just his mother, not just the founder, but the spirit of everything Reeves Financial was meant to be. "What do I do after I've heard it all?" he asked, voice barely audible. "You clean house," she replied. Silence. Then Nathan nodded. Claire stood, placing her coat over her arm. "Then I'll see you tomorrow," she said with a knowing smile. In the boardroom. And just like that, she walked out, leaving behind the truth and a son burdened now with its weight. Monday morning arrived with an eerie calm. The boardroom glowed under pale spring light, but under the surface, something tectonic was about to shift. Martin arrived first, clipboard tucked neatly under his arm, radiating confidence. Amanda swept in next, already mid-call, lips tight with command. Logan followed with that same obnoxious grin and an extra-large latte in hand. Susan trailed last, scanning the room like a hawk. At the head of the table stood Nathan Morrison, still, silent. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "Take a seat." They settled into their usual places, until their eyes fell upon the second chair at the head of the table. Clare Morrison entered and sat. Amanda blinked, Martin's brow furrowed. Logan's smirk faltered. Susan opened her mouth, but Nathan raised a hand. "She's here at my request. No objections." Martin tried to recover. Of course. Always a pleasure to see the founder in the room again. Claire said nothing. Instead, she placed a small black device on the table and pressed play. Their voices, their own voices, filled the boardroom. Plans to dismantle Nathan, shifts of budgets to shell firms, laughs about cutting janitor pay and burying dissent. One by one, their betrayals unfolded, undeniable. When the recording ended, the room was suffocating with silence. Nathan leaned forward, voice steady. "That was last Thursday, 9:42 p.m., recorded from a cleaning cart outside conference room C. And that's only the beginning." Martin blurted, "This is absurd. Who approved this? It's illegal." Claire cut him off. "Illegal? Like funneling money through fake entities? Like falsifying audits? Like creating a workplace built on fear? If you'd like to call legal, I already have." Amanda turned to Nathan, voice shrill. "You don't believe this, she's twisting it." But Nathan didn't flinch. He had already begun to see it, to hear it. And now he knew. "I listened to everything," Nathan said, his voice low and steady, like steel wrapped in velvet. "Every recording, every word. I heard how you laughed while dismantling my position, how you planned to gut this company and rebuild it as a machine fed by fear." Logan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed with defiance. "You're going to believe a janitor over your entire executive team? That's ridiculous." Claire turned to him, eyes unblinking. "You didn't think twice when you spilled coffee on my clean floor. You humiliated me just to feel taller. Amanda slapped me in front of junior analysts. Martin forced workers to scrub spotless floors while mocking their wages. You didn't know I was the founder. But that's not the point." Her voice grew sharper but never raised. "The point is, you thought I didn't matter. You treated me like I was disposable. That's who you are when no one's watching." The silence that followed was suffocating. Nathan stood, his hands resting on the table like anchors. "You've undermined this company from within. Everything we stood for, dignity, transparency, shared purpose, you turned into performance. Claire built this company to elevate others, and you tried to burn it down behind her back." Martin's facade cracked. His voice was urgent now. "Nathan, let's discuss this in private. We can restructure. This doesn't have to go public." "It already is," Nathan replied, the finality in his voice unmistakable. "This boardroom is being recorded. Legal has been looped in since 8 a.m. Susan went pale. "I was just following—" "No." Nathan cut her off, with the weariness of someone who's seen enough. "You had choices. All of you did, and you chose ambition over integrity." Claire stood too, her tone level and deliberate. "You thought you were playing chess, but the pieces were watching, and this board was never yours." Nathan inhaled deeply. "Effective immediately, Martin Cole, Amanda Sloan, Logan Brooks, and Susan Hartley. You're suspended pending investigation. Your access to company systems is revoked." You'll be escorted out today." Martin's chair scraped back. "You can't do this." But the doors opened. Security entered. No words were needed. As each executive was escorted out, some protesting, some silent, the room grew simultaneously heavier and lighter. Claire looked at her son, and her voice softened again. "The hardest part of leadership isn't building something, it's protecting it, especially when the threat wears a familiar face." Nathan nodded. "Thank you for reminding me." She picked up the recorder, slipped it into her coat pocket. It was never about revenge, it's about course correction. And with that, Claire walked out, head high, no longer cloaked in anonymity or burdened by resentment. Not defeated, not angry, but restored. 3 weeks passed, and the energy inside Reeves Financial changed. What once felt cold and clinical now pulsed with quiet purpose. The same elevators that once carried silence now carried small talk and sincerity. The same polished floors were still polished, but the people walking them now held their heads differently. Claire declined every press request. She refused any official title. She didn't want recognition. She wanted restoration. Each morning she arrived not to the executive floor, but to the heart of the company. She brought bagels to the maintenance crew. She sat beside customer service reps. She asked questions no one had thought to ask before. What's missing? What's broken? What's been ignored? Elena Rivera now stood proudly as the new head of facilities. Her badge bore her name, not a temporary sticker. She led the department with grace and fairness. Lunch breaks were respected, shift schedules balanced, budgets included staff input. Her corkboard was covered in thank you notes from colleagues. One read, "Thank you for noticing me." Nathan had changed too. The doubt in his eyes had been replaced with clarity. Town halls were now weekly. Whistleblower protections had been reinstated. But most importantly, he listened. Fully, active. Each executive was now required to shadow a frontline worker once a month. Nathan's first shift, warehouse receiving. When his scanner jammed, he laughed, asked for help, and fixed it, guided by Elena herself. Claire walked the halls daily, notebook in hand. She didn't lecture, she didn't quote rules, but when she entered a room, people noticed, because they knew she saw everything. One afternoon, she stopped by Nathan's office. He was reviewing policy drafts, posture relaxed but focused. She placed a worn folder on his desk. "What's this?" he asked. "A list," she said. "Every decision I ever made that put people first, and every one I didn't. Learn from both." He opened it, gently, then reached beneath his desk and pulled out a plaque. "We had this made," he said. "I didn't know if you'd want it." She read the inscription aloud. "The true measure of leadership is how you treat those with nothing to offer you." She didn't cry, but her fingers lingered on the plaque longer than necessary. That Friday, Nathan stood in the atrium. No stage, no teleprompter, just a stool and a mic. "I want to thank someone today," he said. "Not for building this company, but for saving it. My mother reminded me that power is a test, and too often we fail when no one is watching. She came back to show us that dignity isn't a perk, it's a right." In the back of the room, Claire stood, arms folded, smiling quietly. "And if you ever wonder whether one person can still make a difference," Nathan added, "ask yourself who cleaned your desk this morning and whether you thanked them." The room stilled. Then a single clap, then another, and another, until the atrium thundered with applause, not for a CEO, not for a policy, but for a return of conscience, of decency, of justice. That evening, Claire stepped onto the rooftop terrace, the city humming below her. The skyline was calm, the wind soft. Nathan joined her, 2 coffees in hand. "You okay?" he asked. "I am now," she replied. He handed her the notebook. I added a few pages. Inside were notes from employees, promises from managers, a page titled Lessons Learned. At the bottom, in Nathan's own handwriting, leadership isn't about being seen. Claire closed the book, her voice barely above a whisper. Never forget. A company doesn't collapse overnight. It erodes, decision by decision, silence, and it's rebuilt the same way, brick by brick, choice by choice. She looked at him, the weight of legacy in her eyes. To make better choices. He nodded. They stood together for a while, not in triumph, not in mourning, but in quiet resolve. Because the real work, the work of rebuilding, had just begun. Because in the end, respect isn't a memo, integrity isn't a slogan, and dignity is never optional.